Hello and welcome to Today's Take, hosted by me, Jane Azzopardi, the podcast that takes you beyond the headlines and gives you the story behind the story that you see on TV. And this week we have a special treat for you. You know how much we love our royal news on the Today Show, and one of our favourite people to talk to about it is the former Queen's former press secretary, Dickie Arbiter, who just happens to be on holiday here in Australia at the moment and is joining me here in the studio. Dickie, welcome to Today's Take.
Thank you, Jane.
We talk to you so much on the Today Show, and usually we get about 3 or 4 minutes to get your thoughts, if that. So today's a real special treat, so I can ask you all the questions that I've been hoarding.
As long as I'm finished by 5 o'clock, because I've got to get to the airport.
And fly home, I know. Okay, my first question though is something that we don't always get to talk to you about, which is you. And you were the press secretary for the late Queen Elizabeth over a really consequential period of time between 1988 and 2000. Tell me, first of all, what does a job like that involve?
A job like that involves, I suppose, protecting the royal family. You can't protect them from gossip because newspapers will write anything and everything, and provided it's not libelous, you can't go for them. And most of the time it wasn't libelous. So it's really, you're there as a provider of information and facilitating particularly on royal tours abroad, tours within the United Kingdom. It's changed a lot since I left because you've got digital platforms. So you've got a broader base of which to put out your information. And the trouble is today that with the internet, misinformation can get out in a nanosecond and it'll take you the rest of your life to try and correct it. And a lot of people say, well, why don't Buckingham Palace correct things? If you start trying to correct things that are on digital platforms, you will have a whole department of about 2,000 people monitoring, and you'll never do it. So it's the old mantra, never explain, never complain.
We've heard that a lot.
We've heard that a lot, but unless it's libelous, you don't touch it.
So how do you get a job like that? You were a journalist, you were a royal correspondent, and how does that happen?
I was a broadcast journalist, and I was about to leave for this country for its bicentennial in 1988, and late Queen was coming out in April 88. And I had a phone call the night before I left from somebody I knew in the press office. It's now communications office, but it's all the same, saying if I were approached, would I be interested? And I'd been thinking, I was coming into my late 40s, and I thought, yeah, I've got to move on. I've got to do something different. Because in those days, retirement age in the UK was 60. No ifs and buts. 60, you're gone. Ta-da, thank you for your help. Goodbye. And this just came out of the sky. And I said, yeah, of course I'd be interested. I knew the job was mine. But I went out and I covered the tour. And it was an extensive tour. We started in Perth. We went to Tasmania, went to Geelong, Longreach, Brisbane, Sydney, Newcastle, Albury, Canberra.
Jumped all over the place.
All over the place. And when I got back, I resigned and I started on the 1st of July. So, you know, people say, well, was it difficult going from poacher to gamekeeper? No, It was just different title, looking a bit smarter than I did as a journo.
Did you find, making that switch from being on the other side to being on the inside, how did you find Fleet Street, if I can put it that way, to deal with? Because the British press are notorious. We do hear stories.
They're like Rottweilers.
Yeah, I mean, is it as vicious as it's sometimes made out?
It used to be. It used to be because it was a case of dog eats dog.
Right.
And there were royal correspondents. They're there today, but the attitude was very different. Newspapers had the monopoly. They weren't competing with anybody other than television. And they had to provide stories. And if they didn't have a story, they'd sort of look up into the sky and grab something out the sky and kind of make it up. But it was very difficult. But today, I won't say it's easier, but they are competing on a very, very wide digital platform. And the newspapers, they're all online and they're updating constantly. So they're in there with the rest of them.
So your job at that time was effectively to be kind of like the press gatekeeper.
I was
for
the
late
gatekeeper,
Queen.
but my remit. There were 4 of us who were press secretaries to the Queen. We each had a remit. Mine was to look after Charles and Diana.
Okay.
By that time, the marriage was already down the tubes, and we had to put on a happy face.
Wow.
That everything wasn't rosy, but everything was pretty good. and they were working together as a team, and they were, until it got to sort of 92, when at the beginning of the year they went to India. Diana went to the Taj Mahal, he went to Bangalore. Not his fault, that's the way tours were planned. Had we been going the year before instead of the Gulf War, which was postponed, the tour would have been longer, and he would have gone with Diana to the Taj Mahal. Right. But the tour was truncated, and every tour has a purpose to it. It's selling UK PLC, beating the drum, flying the flag, group of businessmen follow out, sponsored by the Department of Trade and Industry, meeting their opposite numbers in India. And Charles was giving a keynote speech to both groups, British group and the host country group. And that was the only opportunity of doing it. Unfortunately, what he had said in 1980, when he went to visit India and went to the Taj Mahal, one day I would like to bring my wife here. Well, 12 years later, he was in Bangalore. She was 1,500 miles away at the Taj Mahal. So very unfortunate.
And if your job then is to look after a married couple who now, as history tells us, weren't going to last, and the British press are constantly sort of niggling away for stories and pulling at the threads that they can see. Yeah. What was that like for you, being inside, well, I guess a gatekeeper to that marriage?
Well, it was okay until you had the odd private secretary. I mentioned sort of the beginning of 92 in India. The end of 92, they were in South Korea. And one royal correspondent from one of the red tops, one of the tabloids, went to the private secretary and said, is their marriage okay? And this idiot private secretary, and he was an idiot to say what he did say, well, every marriage has problems, handing the journo a story.
Yes.
So headlines, Charles Diana marriage in trouble. You can't firefight that one. It's out there. So you never explain, never complain.
And you were working for the Queen. How was she reacting to all of that?
Well, 1992, she labelled it at the end of that year as her annus horribilis, and it was a horrible year for her, none of which was of her making. But because she was head of state, and it was all her children going off-piste, I mean, you had Charles and Diana marriage going down the tubes, Andrew and Fergie's marriage going down the tubes, well, that was to be expected anyway, and getting divorced. Anything that could go wrong did go wrong, and of course those famous Fergie pictures, having her toes sucked in the south of France by her financial advisor. Obviously, he thought her toes were an abacus, an excuse for an abacus. It was tough.
Did you ever find out what the Queen really thought of those photos?
The look on her face said it all. She never said anything, but with the late Queen, you had to read her.
Right.
A lot of people would say, well, she's looking glum, or she's looking this, she's looking that. You actually had to read her, and you could read her by looking into her eyes. Her eyes said a lot.
Yeah, a few people have mentioned that, and you can sort of see that in the portraits that we have of Queen Elizabeth II. What's your favourite memory of her?
Well, I've got two favourite memories.
Okay.
One of them, when I started, the private secretary, who essentially was the boss of the press office and what have you, said, you're going up to Balmoral. And I said, why? He said, well, you're going to meet the Queen. I said, but I've already met her. No, you've never worked for her. Now pack your bags and go. So I went off to Balmoral. Cut a long story short, I arrived there, it was chucking it down, raining cats and dogs. Footman greets me, takes me to my room, said, can you be in the entrance hall in half an hour? You're going on a picnic. And he said, don't worry, you're going to a log cabin. So fine, so I get dressed. I took my whole wardrobe because I'm not sure what to put on, but I probably dressed the right way. Anyway, I'm standing in the hallway kicking my heels, and this 5'4" whirlwind whips past me and said, come on, get in. And I got into Land Rover.
And that was the Queen, just to be clear, okay.
That was the Queen, and I thought for a moment, oh, well, I'll navigate. And I thought, don't be stupid, Arbiter, you've never been here before, you don't know where you're going. She was a very fast driver. A journey that would take a normal driver maybe about 15 minutes, took her 12.
Wow.
In the car, foot flat on the accelerator, and off we go.
Does the Queen even have a driver's licence?
No.
Yeah, okay, all right.
She didn't. But she learned to drive during the war.
Of course.
Well, in those days, you didn't have a driving licence. You just learnt to drive and then got behind the steering wheel.
Wow.
Keep death off the roads, drive on the pavement sort of thing.
Wow.
And we arrived at the log cabin, and she said, I'm going inside, you go and talk to Philip, Prince Philip.
Yes.
He knew I had spent some time in Southern Africa, so we had commonality in that we're talking game conservation, and we had a lot in common on that aspect. But he started explaining the sort of the lie of the land, because we were high on a crag overlooking Loch Mick, which was stunningly beautiful. And then this voice said, "Okay, lunch ready, Queen," and we go in. Now there are only 4 of us, no footmen, no butlers, no servants, nothing.
Wow.
And Prince Philip, Lady in Waiting, late Queen, and myself. I haven't got a clue what we talked about. It just sort of went straight over my head. But I do remember at the end of lunch, the Queen said, "We have to clear up. We leave it as we found it." So I took this as my cue as the newbie, went into the kitchen, started washing up. And I heard this footfall, and I thought, "Oh, nice, Lady in Waiting's coming to give me a hand." And I said casually over my shoulder without turning around, "Okay, I'll wash you dry." And a pregnant pause, and this very familiar voice said, "No, I'll wash you dry."
And it was the Queen.
It was the Queen. She plunged her hands into soapy suds. No rubber gloves, never wore rubber gloves. So she did the washing up, I did the drying up, and we chatted along like Darby and Joan. It was terrific. But the other occasion was the last time I ever spoke to her was the very last reception she ever went to in Buckingham Palace, which was about 2 or 3 weeks before COVID, before the pandemic.
Right.
And she was there for a farewell, and she stood in the doorway, and she liked to talk to her retirees. She didn't care about people who left to go and make more money somewhere else. But if you had retired, she gave you time. So I went home and we had a chat. And as I took my leave, which you do, and you bow your head from the neck down, I saw her eyes glint, and I thought, something's coming, Arbiter, something is coming. And she looked me squarely in the eyes. She said, "I see you're still wearing those dreadful ties." Dreadful ties.
And what did you can you talk back to the Queen? Do you respond?
We both laughed.
Okay.
I did say, "And I thought you liked them." And what is interesting is she never, at any time that I worked there, complained about them or sent somebody to tell me to wear something a little bit more sober.
Right.
It's just accepted.
So all these stories sort of paint her as quite down to earth, rather than, we think of the Queen and we think of the pictures with the crown and the jewels and meeting of prime ministers.
She was pretty down to earth because, if she's reacting to something, there is an interpreter. You get a dozen reporters, and each reporter is interpreting something different. To give you an idea of how natural she was, after the lunch we walked along the shores of Loch Mick, and there were little gullies of water trickling down from the hills, and one of them was blocked, and she bent down and she scooped out the dirt and let the water meander its way down into the lake, and just shook her hand like that and carried on. Wow. That's the sort of person she was. She didn't react to things. There was a time at the decommissioning of the Royal Yacht Britannia in '97 where she sort of put a finger up to her eye. And yes, there was probably a tear, because that had been a home from home. Wherever she travelled in the world, if the yacht was there, Western Isles cruise, which took about 3 weeks every summer, and it was a home, and it was the one place that she could really relax, aside from Balmoral. So there probably was a tear, but she was really down to earth. She was a countrywoman at heart. She loved dogs, she loved horses, she loved people, not necessarily in that order.
Okay.
But
do you think that might have been the secret to why she had such a long and successful reign?
Well, she had a long, successful reign because her father died of cancer.
Yeah.
Her mother lived to a ripe old age of 102. And she never really had an ailment. She'd been in hospital a couple of times for a knee operation. She'd been in observation because she'd had gastroenteritis, so they were checking the dehydration aspect of it. But she'd never really been sick. Yes, she'd had the odd sniffles here and there. So she was pretty healthy until near the end of her life, where she had these mobility issues, which we're led to believe was cancer of the bones. Right. I say led to believe that it's cancer of the bones. So she was fit, she was healthy, she was dedicated to her role. Her primary role was the survivability of the monarchy. And my goodness, did she make sure it survived.
Oh, we're going to get to that too. But I do want to still stay on your time at Buckingham Palace as well. And particularly, it was a particularly difficult period because you were there when Princess Diana died. And I think we all remember where we were when that happened, so far away here in Australia. But what was it like to be there among her family when that happened?
Well, it was very difficult. There were different feelings about Diana amongst the family, but I remember on the night of the 30th, because she died on the 31st at 3 o'clock in the morning UK time. I had a phone call at about 11:30 from CNN in Atlanta, and his deep American southern drawl came out and said, "Can you tell us about the crash?" I said, "What crash?" Because nothing had reached the UK, and as he carried on talking, I switched on the TV, and there it was unfolding. And 3:15 that Sunday morning, I got news that she had gone, and half an hour later I was back in the office. It was very difficult. There were certain aspects of it that the royal family were slow on, particularly the flag over Buckingham Palace. It was the thought, well, no flag had ever flown over Buckingham Palace other than the Royal Standard, and when the sovereign's in residence it flies, when she's not it doesn't. I had, early that morning, certainly by 4 o'clock, 4:15, I'd got the flag at Windsor Castle to half-mast, Sandringham at half-mast, Holyrood House in Edinburgh down to half-mast. Most of the other palaces didn't have flagpoles. So we'd gone in the right direction, but Buckingham Palace was a sore point. There was also talk, why haven't Palace sort of made known about the arrangements for the funeral? And what people, they realise it now, but what they didn't realise then was that Diana was divorced, therefore she came under the Spencer family. Earl Spencer, Charlie Spencer, was in South Africa, and he had to be informed, and it had to be his decision as to what kind of funeral it would be. Would it be a private family occasion, or would it be something different? And he felt that because she was a very public person, it should be a royal funeral, which is when we swung into action. By 6 o'clock that morning, I knew that an aeroplane from the Queen's flight was going to Paris to collect her. I knew exactly what the arrangements were, but we had to finesse them before we actually went public with them.
And you were working for the Queen and by extension Charles. How did he handle that news when it happened?
He was devastated. People don't give credit. They think, well, he was divorced and he didn't really care. And there are all sorts of stories have come out about how he broke the news to his children, how he interacted with his children. What people don't realise that he does it now, but early on in his life, the royals never showed emotion. To them it was a weakness, showing emotion. We all remember that interview at the time of the engagement when the reporter said to them, "So much in love?" Diana said, "Of course," and he said, "Whatever in love means." It was a throwaway, because I won't say he was embarrassed, but they just weren't taught how to deal with emotion. You look at them at funerals of family, there were never tears. Most people, if a close relative dies, there are tears. There were never tears. They were taught never to show emotion. So it was very difficult for him. They say that he argued that a royal flight had to go and collect Diana. What do you want? And come back in a Harrods van, which was just made up.
Right.
There was always a Queen's flight.
Never complain, never explain.
Never complain, never explain. There was always a Queen's flight going to pick her up, and he was going to go along with her sisters.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of my enduring mental images, I guess, or the things that I remember from that time is, of course, seeing William and Harry at that funeral. And I think, most Australians, that would be one of the images that we would remember from that time. Which is why I find it so heartbreaking, really, when I see what has happened to their relationship since. How do you see that from being there at that time and seeing them go through that so publicly at such a young age? And at the moment, it seems like they don't even talk.
Well, at the time of the funeral, a lot of people said, well, they should never have walked behind the coffin. And there is a feeling within the royals that male members should walk. And Prince Philip was sympathetic to them both, and he said, "If I walk, will you walk?" Yeah. And because he walked, they did walk. A lot of people say, well, Harry was only 12, coming up 13, and he shouldn't have been there. Had he not been there, he would have regretted it for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that the relationship has gone the way it has gone. They were always close. I remember them as that big and that big. They were always close, and they were always tumbling with each other. But, and it is very sad the way it's gone. William has coped with the death of his mother, and he's not riding on her memory to undertake the role that he is undertaking, although he's got the sort of charities that she would have pursued. Harry constantly makes reference to his mother, and there's got to be a time when he's got to let go, because if he doesn't let go, it's going to be with him for the rest of his life. And there are those who say, well, yes, there's an element of mental illness. Mental illness can only be dealt with if you help yourself. You can get other people to help you, but you've also got to help yourself. And I don't think at the moment Harry is helping himself. It doesn't appear to be.
You're not a fan of the direction his life has taken?
I think he's chosen the direction, and he must live with it. I think it's very unfortunate that he has done what he has done with the Oprah interview, the 6 hours of Netflix, the book Spare. You might have disagreement with your family, but you don't rubbish your family. And he was rubbishing the family. Prince Philip was dying, when the Queen was dying. The timing was pretty awful, and there doesn't seem to be any regret there. And I just wonder whether there is another book coming out. I hope there isn't. But it doesn't help if you rubbish your family and then expect them to apologise. To apologise for what?
Well, we did see him have a meeting with King Charles fairly recently. Do you think there's a way back for Harry into the royal family, or at least to? I mean, look, I have 2 little boys myself, and I feel like Diana would want her boys to be friends.
She would want her boys to be friends. I don't think if Diana, no, it's not a question I don't think. If Diana had been alive, that Harry would not have taken the direction he has taken in the marriage stakes, because Diana would have seen to that. She was very astute. She might have given the impression that she was an airhead, but she was not. No. She was a very astute and very clever woman. And Harry wouldn't be in the position that he's in now, she's still alive, but she's not. And it's very unfortunate that it's taken the course that it's taken. The brothers will take a long time to make up, if ever. No parent likes to lose a child, and Charles would love to embrace Harry, but Harry's not making it easy for him. Charles finds that he cannot speak openly to him without it being splashed out in the American media. It didn't take long after that meeting for news to leak out of how the meeting went. And that's unfortunate. And if the parent can't trust his son not to blurt out to the media, then there's no hope. Not for a moment will they come back into the royal fold. I don't believe for a moment that Meghan will ever want to step foot in the UK again.
Wow.
Harry probably would love to, but he's not going to go anywhere without her, and certainly not without his children.
Oh, well, I for one hope that they can patch it up somehow. Let's switch topics, sort of. We'll stay on Charles. What do you think what kind of job do you think he's doing as king?
I think he's doing a very good job, given the circumstances that he was diagnosed with a cancer last year. We don't know cancer of what, but he is still undergoing treatment. And yet he is in there like a tiger. He's doing anything and everything. And he's not showing signs of tiring. He's got a tremendous capacity. I remember when he broke his arm playing polo. I was actually down at Highgrove at the time because we were filming that morning something for the Prince's Trust. Then he went off to play polo. I had lunch and I was about to leave for London, and word came through he'd fallen off his horse. He'd broken his arm, he'd been taken to the Cirencester Cottage Hospital. And there was a sort of kind of manipulation on the general anaesthetic. Would it work? We don't know. It just so happened it didn't work, and he had to have an operation. But I remember going out, there was a big assembly of television crews and reporters and photographers wanting to know how he was and will he play polo again. And I explained what had happened. Arm had been broken in 3 places. I said, yes, according to the doctors, he will play polo again. Given time, it's got to heal, but he will play polo again. And he did play polo again. And he was very woozy. And when I got back, he said, exactly what I wanted you to do to allay any fears that I won't be playing polo. And he did play polo again. His biggest problem with polo, he had a back injury. And after so many minutes in the saddle, it did hurt him. But he bravely carried on. He's now given up, obviously. But he's doing incredibly well. I mean, all you've got to do is look at last October when he came here.
So popular.
Tens of thousands of people that turned out. The British press were full of doom and gloom. No, it's going to be a failure. Nobody's going to turn up. Well, they had to eat humble pie because they did turn up.
Didn't they?
And one can only hope that the same thing happens should William and Catherine come here next year.
Okay, well, that's a good segue into that visit. Do we know when it is happening? Do we know if they'll be bringing the children? Do we know where they'll be going?
Well, do we know? There are only a couple, as far as the children are concerned, there are only a couple of windows that they could bring the children, because the British education system is very hard on families. Children are not allowed to be taken out of school to go on holiday.
Even if they're going to be king one day?
Even if they're going to be king one day.
Wow, okay.
And certainly the royals will lead by example, and they would never do that. So the only windows of opportunity would be Easter, which is quite short, and given that you sort of jet lag when you get here and you need a day or so to recuperate, or July, summer holidays, which gives a lengthier window, because you can't come this far and not go to New Zealand as well. Unfortunately, Charles and Camilla couldn't last year because he had to go to the Commonwealth Heads of Government Conference. Had that not been on in Samoa, it's conceivable that New Zealand would have been on the cards, but that would have been too much for him given the treatment that he's still having. So I would aim for, assuming bringing the children, and I think they would want to bring the children, for July.
Okay.
It's not a good month, climate-wise.
No, not the best.
It's not the best.
I mean, it's okay if they go up north of Australia, it'll still be nice.
Yes, but there's more to Australia than up north.
Of course.
Down south.
There's plenty.
And there's west.
Yes.
So I would plumb for then. The other thing you've got to bear in mind is this: Catherine stopped treatment last September. She's easing her way into into work. She's facing a certain amount of criticism from certain quarters of the British press for not pulling her weight. But you cannot understand what a person is going through when they have been diagnosed with something unless you have yourself. I think it's been a wake-up call for her in that she's getting her priorities right. And for her, her priority is her family. Because that cancer could come back at any time and have devastating consequences. So she's doing it absolutely right. She's focusing on her early learning charities. She is there for like the set pieces, like Trooping the Colour, Garter. She missed Ascot because Ascot's not a three-line whip. And she'd be there for Remembrance Day come next month. She was there for Wimbledon because she's a patron of All England Lawn Tennis Club. So she's doing the set pieces, but she's also doing a fair amount of work behind the scenes with her charities. She is doing engagements with William. She was at, for example, last week, she was at a fabric mill.
Oh, yes.
And recently, a few days ago, she was in Northern Ireland with William. They went to a flax farm, so she saw the raw material, what it's like in producing the raw material before it goes to the mill. They went to a fire search and rescue training centre, and they went to a cider farm. So it was very much aimed at the community, and they work incredibly well together. And if doing engagements together brings some more out into the public, then I'm all for it. But we've got to recognise that she had cancer treatment up until September. It could come back at any time. She has a young family and she wants to prioritise that family, and she's doing things the way she wants to do them, which are absolutely right.
And a royal tour to Australia, not only is it a 24-hour or thereabouts flight to bring everyone out, but I followed William and Kate on their first tour here with Prince George. I think it was about in 2014.
Yeah.
And it was long. It was about 2 weeks. They kind of had 5 days in New Zealand, jetting all about New Zealand, and then over all sorts of Australia, which is, lots of distance to cover, as well as so many events in a day. I mean, these things are tiring.
They are tiring.
And everybody wants a piece of you.
Everybody wants a bit of the action. Everybody wants to pump the royal flesh. There are changes of clothes because different venues require different clothing. I mean, you're not just a country, you're a continent.
Yes.
This is a big blob in the South Pacific that could fit and cover the whole of Europe, and that's what people in Europe don't understand, certainly in the UK, how big a country it is. That, yeah, okay, you come to Sydney, you can't go to Canberra, but there is a whole big open space to go to as well. And Lake Queen, I was on her 88 tour, which we talked about earlier, starting off in Perth and finishing off in Canberra, and sort of doing Kalgoorlie, Geraldton, down to Tasmania, Hobart, Geelong, Longreach, Brisbane, Sydney, Newcastle, Albury, Canberra. That's a lot of territory to cover for somebody in their almost in their 80s. So when William and Catherine come, they're going to have to cover a lot of territory, but it is going to have to be planned in such a way that it's not going to overtire her, overtax her, and probably and possibly trigger the return of that dreadful cancer.
I have so many questions for you, Dickie, but I am conscious that you have other things that you need to do today, so I'm going to try and get to the end of it. And one of the topics, I guess, anytime a royal family or a royal visit happens in Australia, is we talk about, is Australia ever going to become a republic? And, you know, when the Queen was around, I think the general line was, we're not going to have that conversation while the Queen is on the throne. When Anthony Albanese visited the UK recently, he told King Charles, you know, it wasn't on his agenda. You know, as an outside observer, do you ever see Australia severing ties with the monarchy?
Well, it's a leading question. Do I ever see will
in the foreseeable future?
What is quite interesting. I'm going to go back to 1999, that referendum, where the referendum result came out in favour of retaining the monarchy. And at the time, a lot of young people were being vox pop, what you call in the industry being interviewed just for a snatch comment. And they were all saying, if it ain't broke, why fix it?
Yeah, there is definitely that sentiment, yeah.
And what is quite interesting is that when your Prime Minister was voted into office in 2022, he made very clear it was not on the agenda for his first term of office. And British newspapers say, yeah, well, you know, if he gets back in again in 2025, yeah, it'll be there. But when he came over, first time for the funeral and then for the coronation, excuse me, Prime Minister, he was all over the King like a rash. And then, as you rightly say, at Balmoral, again, there was no mention. It's not on the agenda. And quite frankly, you do have an Australian de facto head of state. It's called Governor General.
That's true.
So why change a system that's actually working?
Do you think the royals would care if Australia, how would they feel about it if it did happen?
Well, if I can quote the late Queen, when she came to Sydney after that referendum in March 2020, she said it's up to the Australians to decide through the due democratic process. And I suppose deep down inside, the royals do care. Charles said his happiest time in his youth was here in Geelong.
Wow.
He loved it.
Well, I mean, I'm not surprised.
He hated Gordonston, but Geelong fulfilled everything that he had longed for at Gordonston.
Well,
and that was his happiest time in his childhood, was being at Geelong.
So, do you think Prince George would do any education here?
That's up to William.
Yeah,
that's up to William and Catherine. Look, the guy's only 12. Come on, give him a chance.
I know. Well, Prince Harry was here for a little bit too, I think, during his schooling years. So there's sort of a bit of a theme.
Yeah.
So go to an outpost and spend some time and learn about the colonies.
It would be no bad thing.
No, absolutely not. Dickie, before I let you go, I'm going to ask you a question that may be impossible to answer, although I think I know what you're going to say. Do you have a favourite royal?
Not really. They all fulfil a job, an important job. I worked for Charles, and I liked him. I mean, he had what is known as the Windsor temper, and we saw that at the time of the proclamation when the pen dried up and pen wouldn't work. And in the days I worked for him, he used to go into orbit, sort of go up there and down, and then that was it. I'd seen late Queen lose her temper. Yeah, there is a famous Windsor temper. William's lost his temper.
Really? Okay.
But they all do a very good job. I think Princess Anne's terrific.
She's coming to Australia soon.
She's coming next month.
How relevant is she, do you think, as the sister of the Queen? How relevant is she to Australia?
Oh, she's very relevant.
Sister of the King, sorry, I should say.
She's relevant to Charles. There's a wonderful sequence after the coronation. They were all in the centre room waiting to go on the balcony, and Anne walks in and sees her brother, says, "Hello, old bean," which just sums up the relationship. And he's a great. She is a great source of comfort to him. She's coming out as Colonel-in-Chief, as a guest of your Defence Department, to celebrate the Royal Australian Corps of Signals centenary. They did a lot of good work during World War I, but they were attached to various regiments. They formed their own regiment in 1925. Okay. And this year is their centenary, and Anne's coming out to celebrate. She takes her Colonel-in-Chief role very seriously, and she's been Colonel-in-Chief for almost half of the life of the regiment.
Wow, what an achievement.
Yeah, 48 years.
Oh, well, that is the first royal visit that we can look forward to, and then another one next year. Dickie, I've loved chatting with you. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for inviting me, Jane.
And thank you for listening to today's Take. We'll be back with another episode next week. Until then, I will see you bright and early with the rest of the Today team. Have a great day.